Hello students, and welcome to the first of 4 lectures that we will have this semester as we make our way through World History 505, World War I German U-boat warfare. In our first module, you were introduced to the submarine, its early years, and how it was transformed by the German Navy. In the second module, we discussed Germany's Navy, the beginning of the Great War, and Germany's wartime submarine production. All the major powers in World War I had a submarine fleet, although most were ineffective when compared to the German fleet. England had a comparable submarine fleet, but used it to blockade Germany, but not so much as an offensive weapon on the open ocean. German and other Central Powers U-boat commanders were focused on sinking Allied shipping, thus keeping supplies from reaching England. Germany's U-boat fleet was extremely adept at finding and sinking Allied shipping, but made a point to avoid torpedoing any ships from the United States. Germany issued a statement to the world powers regarding their U-boat operations and what could be expected when one of their U-boats encountered an Allied ship. It is titled German Admiralty Declaration Regarding Unrestricted U-Boat Warfare and is dated 4 February 1915. The U-boat begins to escalate their sinking of enemy ships, but still operated under the prize rules of the Hague Convention of 1899 and 1907, which required them to stop and inspect the ship in question for contraband, and then, and only if they found war supplies going to the Allied forces, were they then allowed to sink the ship carrying the contraband. For the most part, Germany followed these maritime rules of engagement, but soon the Allied ships began to grow in numbers, and the U-boats began slacking on the prize rules, and ships would be sunk that had a profound effect on U.S. President Woodrow Wilson's decision regarding entering or not entering World War I. The German Navy turned to a tactic that was controversial but effective and is called unrestricted submarine warfare, which is what this lecture will be focused on. Documents to be analyzed for this week's assignment are the U.S. and German government documents in the bibliography that are warnings that Wilson gave to the Germans in 1915 and 1916 about unrestricted submarine warfare and Germany's response to Wilson. The links are also in the bibliography for each of the documents. World War I German U-boat commanders played by the rules most of the time, but soon grew tired of stopping ships to inspect their cargo for contraband. Another aspect of stopping the ship and inspecting it was what to do with the crew of the ship that you're going to sink. The U-boats had limited space on board, were built for a specific number of crew, and only had provisions for the crew. If there was not a neutral port to tow the survivors to, nor anywhere close by to drop the crew, the choices became very limited as what they could do for the crew after they sunk their ship. Sometimes they would get lucky and another ship would come along to pick up the survivors. Another negative aspect of stopping a ship and taking the time to inspect it was the U-boat then became an easy target. When a U-boat surfaced to inspect the ship, they would wait until the crew was clear of the ship, then use their deck-mounted 88mm anti-ship cannon to sink that ship. This was done to preserve torpedoes, as space limited the number of torpedoes that could be stowed aboard a U-boat. This operation could be a lengthy endeavor, leaving the U-boat and its crew vulnerable. So for these factors, the tactics of the U-boat commanders changed from one of adhering to prize rules to one of indiscriminately sinking any ship that they came across that was flying an Allied flag. On May 7, 1915, Captain Lieutenant Walter Schweiger, the commander of U-20, fired the torpedo that sent the Lusitania to the bottom of the ocean just off the coast of Ireland. Schweiger did not know what he had done until he saw the name Lusitania on the ship's bow as it sunk, and this ship was a well-known ship at the time. After he realized what had just happened, he panicked for a short amount of time and then decided to disappear beneath the waves instead of helping the survivors. Schweiger did not survive the war, but his logbook did, and in it were the entries about the incident with the Lusitania. The Lusitania would not be the last ship that the German U-boat sunk under controversial conditions. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson began to have dialogue with Germany and gave them a stern warning about sinking any ships flying the American flag, even before the Lusitania was sunk. This could have been, in retrospect, as the same kind of appeasement that was shown to Hitler just before he invaded Poland to kick out the Second World War, or having President Biden giving agitated ultimatums to Russia as it invades its neighbor Ukraine. He could have engaged Russia much sooner than when it mattered, and possibly could have kept war from happening. In one instance, President Wilson was trying to stay out of a European war by chastising Germany about sinking American ships indiscriminately and not retaliating and entering the war. President Biden allowed Russia to invade Ukraine before he showed any interest in stopping war. Both presidents could have done something sooner than they did, but didn't, causing casualties that could have been prevented. Lusitania's casualties were devastating, with almost 1,200 passengers killed, including over 100 Americans. 6 days later, President Wilson responded to this act with a thinly veiled warning of what would happen because of Germany's actions on the high seas. Wilson said that this to the German government, in view of recent acts of the German authorities in violation of America's acts and America's rights on the high seas, which culminated in the torpedoing and sinking of the British steamship Lusitania on May 7, 1915, by which over 100 American citizens lost their lives. It is clearly wise and desirable that the government of the United States and the Imperial German government should come to a clear and full understanding as to the grave situation, which has resulted. Even after this warning, Wilson did not show any inclination to enter a war in Europe. The German U-boats would continue their onslaught of unrestricted submarine warfare and sinking ships indiscriminately until the SS Sussex was torpedoed and almost sunk. The SS Sussex was a British vessel that operated as a ferry in the English Channel and was torpedoed on 24 March 1916 by a German U-boat. President Wilson had finally had enough of the unrestricted submarine warfare and immediately had a conversation with the German government, warning that the U.S. would not tolerate any more sinkings of indiscriminate shipping, especially if U.S. citizens were on the casualty list. The next day, 19 April 1916, Wilson spoke to Congress and let them know about the warning to Germany, who got the message and immediately changed their policy regarding unrestricted submarine warfare. Germany's U-boats went back to prize rules when engaging in Allied shipping. In February of 1917, Germany returned to unrestricted submarine warfare, which caused President Wilson to break off diplomatic ties with Germany and would set the stage for the United States to enter World War I. The German Navy added a very deadly tactic and formation of U-boats to their arsenal, which made the return to unrestricted submarine warfare all the more potent. This was called the Wolf Pack. The U-boats acted like a pack of wolves that was tracking prey and attacked all at once on specified targets. The Wolf Pack tactic was a very effective tactic, but the sheer number of ships that were sailing in convoys from the United States and the advancement of new anti-submarine technology kept the Wolf Pack at bay. The Wolf Pack was so effective that the World War II German U-boat fleet used the same tactic. Unrestricted submarine warfare took a huge toll on Allied shipping, with hundreds of thousands of tons of shipping sunk, precious war and civilian supplies lost, and the devastating loss of human life being the outcome of Germany's tactic of unrestricted submarine warfare. You'll find the sources used in this lecture and needed for your assignment this week in the bibliography with links provided. Pay special attention to the verbiage used, both by the Wilson administration and the German government replies, as both are walking a tightrope in regard to the U.S. entering the war. Neither government wanted that to happen, and that is the reason that Germany backed down from their unrestricted submarine warfare policy. Germany's naval minister, Alfred von Tirpitz, was furious at the German government for backing down from Wilson and later blamed the outcome of the war on the German government being too weak in the face of political opposition. Tirpitz was the reason why Germany had such a powerful navy, and he took it personally when Germany was defeated in the Great War. After World War I, many countries took a hard look at the submarine, with a new focus on the submarine as more than a defensive weapon that they could use to expel unwanted aggressors before they arrived on their shores. As the submarine continued to evolve, its crews needed to be more efficient and professional, As the submarine grew larger, so did its crew, which would have to train and prepare for a new kind of naval warfare. Next week, for Module 4, we will discuss the tight quarters of the U-boat, the adhesion of the crew, their duties and responsibilities, and the operation of the U-boat both in normal operation and that of combat operations in the chaos of war. Thank you for attending today's lecture and have a great evening.